Well, hello, New York.
It's a long way from Sydney.
And we're here because hatred of the Jewish people, anti-Semitism, is not your problem, New York. It's not Israel's problem. It's the problem of the world. It's a problem of our common humanity. And so we're here to share with you a little bit about what we've been doing in Australia. You saw a couple of clips there. I'm Mark.
I'm Freya.
And I wanted to tell you a bit about how this all started for us. So for all the Jewish people in the world, October the 7th changed their lives. My life was changed on October the 9th because less than 48 hours after the worst massacre that Jews had experienced since the Holocaust, Freya, who's studying at Sydney University, called me on the Monday morning of the 9th of October and said, "Hey, Dad, there's a pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel march planned for the center of Sydney. We've got to do something about it." So I phoned the police. The police in Sydney had warned the Jewish community to stay out of the city for their own safety. And so I said to them, well, I think this is unfortunate, and I want to come in. I'm a pastor. I want to come in, and I want to register a counter-protest against this protest of hate. And the police said to me, well, Mr. Leach, if you come in, we will arrest you to keep you safe. So I thought to myself, I'm a very pious religious bloke. And I thought to myself, this is an Australianism. It might not work here. If this offends you, just put it down to me being an Australian. I just thought to myself, bugger that. I thought, mate, I'm an Australian. I'm a Christian. I'm a Jew. My mum was a Holocaust survivor. I'm a pastor. And this rally is going to happen on the steps of the town hall right next to the Anglican Cathedral. So in Sydney, you've got the town hall, City Hall here, the Anglican Cathedral, my cathedral here, and in the middle was where this rally was going to happen. So the rally started. I went along. I dodged the police. I stood up the back. They started their thing. I pulled a great big Israeli flag out, and I waved the flag. And yeah. And 1,000 eyes turned on me, and I got chased out of the square by a bunch of keffiyeh-wrapped thugs threatening to slit my throat. They chased me through the streets of Sydney. I hid behind a police van, and the rest is history. I got a lot of media attention. And here's what the Jewish community said to me. They said, Mark, we're so grateful. Everywhere I went, I was sitting having coffee in the city, and I'd have Jewish folk coming up to me and going, Mark, we're so grateful. Thank you for standing up for us. And I said to them, I did nothing special. I just did what any decent person would do. That's it. So, of course, the problem is, lots of lovely, wonderful, decent people and lovely, decent Christians sit in their churches, sing their songs, binge watch their Netflix, do their quiet times. And it's the equivalent of the 1930s Germans looking the other way as their Jewish neighbors were carted off to be murdered in the gas chambers. And we resolved that never again had to be now. It had to be now. So we started Never Again Is Now. And you might think, after my great big one-person protest, I would have solved anti-Semitism in Australia. The church en masse would have come out. There'd be millions of Christians standing in solidarity with the Jewish people, stopping the hate, pushing back all that is evil. Has that happened, Freya?
I wish. Since October 7, anti-Semitism in Australia, like in the US and around the world, has only gotten worse. We've seen, and they've tracked this, there has been a 738% increase in anti-Semitic incidents in Australia since October 7. 738%. We've seen Jewish businesses forced to close down because they were operating in heavily Muslim areas. And these businesses were targeted because they were owned by Jews. We've seen Jewish members of parliament having their offices defaced, vandalized, and targeted simply because they were Jewish. We've also seen the same thing be extended to people who just support Israel. They're not even Jewish, but they're the targets of the exact same hate. So it's been very, very disturbing what's been happening in Australia and around the Western world.
So we've run a series of rallies. We'll talk a bit about them later around the country, big events in the city centres. In our last event in Melbourne, tell us what happened.
So we had 7,000 people attend our rally on the steps of the Parliament in Victoria, which was amazing. And it was majority Jewish. As you can see there, that was our rally. It was amazing. It was probably 60 to 70% Jewish, and then a decent chunk of Christians, and also a lot of Iranians who were fleeing persecution from the Iranian regime.
Give it up for the Iranians who have suffered under such a terrible, terrible regime for so long.
So this rally, it was really, God was so present. It was a gathering of peace and love. But surrounding the rally were 600 policemen, all armed, the mounted unit on horses and the riot police, 600 in total, there to protect a rally against anti-Semitism. It's amazing that the police were there, and we're very thankful for that. But the fact that we needed 600 police there shows you that the kind of people that, and the kind of hate-filled ideology we're up against. And there were over 50 assaults of people coming to our rally. There was one elderly woman who was 72 years old, who was kicked and spat at and assaulted on her way to a rally about ending Jewish hate. How wrong, how evil is that?
So the hatred that we're experiencing around the world, and didn't Mike Brown do a great job of explaining the origins of it spiritually? It's inexplicable otherwise, but it's deep. Now, some people say, well, it's really just because of what the IDF is doing in Gaza. And, Freya, you're in the Sydney University, you're studying law, you're there, you're involved. Let me ask you this. Before October the 7th, there was no anti-Semitism on Sydney University. They all loved the Jews. The hard socialist left loved Israel. And is that right? Is that what it was like on the university?
Well, that's the lie that they try to tell. They try to say that this anti-Semitism has only started since October 7, and it's not really hatred of Jews, it's just hatred of Israel because of what they're doing. But that is absolutely false. I have been having conversations with students at Sydney University for the last 4 years that I've been a student there, and I have had people refuse to condemn Hamas, glorify them as freedom fighters, say all resistance is justified, not even condemn the killing of innocent Israelis before October 7th. I was physically intimidated and nearly assaulted at a meeting of the Student Representative Council simply for holding an Israeli flag. That was in March of 2022. The anti-Semitism in our universities predates October 7, but October 7 has given it a new face, anti-Zionism. It's not about Jews, it's just Israel. But that is absolutely false because this hatred has existed long before October 7th.
So that's why, friends, we started this movement, Never Again is
Now.
You got it. We started this because it became very clear to us that something had to be done. We couldn't all wait for others to take action. My mother and her parents were Jews in Frankfurt, and like many German Jews, highly assimilated, highly secular. My grandfather was a very successful doctor, in practice with a Gentile. He'd fought in the First World War for the Germans, was decorated with the Iron Cross First Class, and all the way through the 1930s, my grandmother was saying to my grandfather, we've got to leave, we've got to leave, we've got to leave. And my grandfather kept saying, no, but we're Germans. But we're Germans. The elite, enculturated, affluent Germans could not believe that the German people would turn against them. It became very clear to us that there were echoes of pogroms, there were ghosts of pogroms past, stalking the streets of our cities in the Western world and in Australia, and something had to be done. A man who's become a friend of ours, David Lewis, who's the president of the Great Synagogue, the central oldest shul in Sydney, was at a rally put on by Christians in London, an organization called Christian Action Against Antisemitism. Two friends of ours, Tim and Haley, put this on. David went to this event in November last year thinking it was a Jewish event, and he stood there and he heard these Christians stand up and own the church's complicity in anti-Semitism, own our own painful, tragic history in persecuting Jewish people, and then resolve to not repeat that history, but instead to mobilize to stand together with the Jewish people. And it changed David's whole perception of Christianity. He came back to Sydney and said, we've got to do something like that. He reached out to me, I reached out to a friend and another friend, and before Christmas there were 4 of us saying, we've got to do something to bring the Jewish and the Christian communities together in Australia. Fast forward 6 weeks, we had 12,000 people out in the Domain, and we had former prime ministers, we had political leaders, we had religious leaders, we had Iranians, we had everybody out. One of the... we did this. One of the community leaders phoned me afterwards. His name's Yossi, and Yossi called me, and I can't do an Israeli accent, but in a heavy Israeli accent, he said, Mark, I want you to know what it was like. He said, it's like you stood on the stage this afternoon, you stretched out your arms, and you gave 10,000 people a hug. And for the first time in months, if not years in Sydney, we felt loved. And I thought, that's it. That's what we have to do. It's a very simple proposition.
And that is what happens when the church stands up and follows God's commandments to love one another, love our neighbor as ourselves. That is what happens. It changes lives. And it changed the lives of so many Jewish people in Sydney, then in Melbourne, then in Brisbane, where we've run rallies. I just want to read you. After each rally, we get hundreds and hundreds of emails from attendees who are so grateful, and they're overwhelmingly Jewish, who are so grateful for what we've done. But I just want to share with you one. This is from a Jewish woman who wrote to us after the Melbourne event. I have never been so proud to be an Aussie, to be Jewish, and to care so deeply for the people who stood on that stage and around me. Thank you for your courage, your truth, your bravery to stand and say racism of any form is not okay. To say we stand with you. Your God is our God. Your values are our values. Thank you. Writing these words, I am crying again. Tears of pure joy and abject horror, all mixed together. Because we were there, but we shouldn't have needed to be there. Thank you, Mark Leach, and every single speaker for your leadership and words. I will remember, and I will stand with you together. Most people are sheep or cowards. You are neither. Thank you with all my heart.
One of the most moving moments of my life was at the end of our event in Melbourne, and it had been so hostile. We had 7,000 people out. We had across, the whole range of the Jewish community, the Christian community, Iranians, and we were surrounded, barricaded in by police with a couple of thousand protesters yelling at us, drumming, screaming, shouting for the whole duration of the event. But in that space was a glimpse of heaven. It was a glimpse of heaven, friends, because there was love and there was joy and there was light, and we were together in our common humanity, standing before the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and celebrating life and justice and truth. And it was beautiful. And at the end of the event, we stood together, and it had been raining, and up on the stage was my new friend Moishi Khan, who's the head of the Rabbinic Council of Victoria, Chabad rabbi. And then there was a Jewish politician, and then the cantor from one of the synagogues, and we all stood on this stage over the sea of humanity, surrounded by baying hatred, and linked arms, and we sang Am Yisrael Chai, and then we sang Hatikva, and we had Australian flags and Israeli flags, and I thought, this is it. This is what the world needs to see, that Jew and Christian together can stand and sing and celebrate and love each other.
And I've had dozens and dozens of conversations, particularly with young people. I'm 21, and especially university students. So many young Jews asking me, or just wanting a friend, honestly. One of my friends put a poll out on her Instagram asking people if they'd lost friends since October 7. Almost 80% of people said they had lost friends since October 7th. I think from my conversations with people in the Jewish community, they're looking around right now, and so many of the people they thought they could rely on, the childhood friends who they grew up with, the colleagues at work, the friends at university, so many of them are just not there anymore. So who's there? Who's there for them now? Well, that's where we as Christians have to step up and step alongside our Jewish brothers and sisters.
I have a friend, a new friend, a Jewish businessman, very senior, very significant in Sydney. He, get this, he invited 92 of his non-Jewish friends to come to the rally with him. How many do you think came? He's known these guys for years. He's done business with them. And 12? 3. And he said to me, well, what's the point? The Christians aren't there for us. The non-Jews aren't there. And I said, hey, listen, that's 3 more who came who wouldn't have come if you hadn't asked them and if we hadn't done this. So you just start. You just have to start. You can't wait for the big numbers. God doesn't. You've just got to start. You've just got to get going and do something. You can't wait. Now, Freya, you're busy. You work full-time in politics. Freya works for a political think tank. And you're studying law and commerce. You're engaged to be married. You've got a lot on your plate. Don't clap, give money. So you've got a lot on. There is nothing in this fight for you. Like, you're not getting fame or riches. In fact, all you get is hate mail and death threats. So why are you doing this? Why did you schlep across the world to come and speak to a bunch of people in New York? Apart from the fact Mitch is a hard man to say no to.
For me, it's very, very simple. We need to love our neighbor. That is the summary of the law. Love our God and love one another. That is it. That is what we're called to do as Christians. And I think that if we truly, truly believe that, we have to actually put it into action. It's great to pray. It's great to go to church and talk about, peace in the Middle East, whatever. But we need to put that love into action. And we were given the ultimate example of what it means to put love into action by Jesus, our Messiah. And what did he do? He laid down his life because he loved us. So it doesn't matter what people on social media are saying or how many hours we dedicate to this, because we know what the ultimate example is. We know that we are saved because Jesus gave his life for us. What are we willing to do to love our neighbor? And what's the worst they can do? Kill us, then we get to go be with God sooner. So
one of the hardest things, we have volunteer teams. We have 600 volunteers. Like God is this movement that has started in Australia and is now coming here, I think, at least with us. God has just birthed this incredible energy of Jewish and Christian people working together. So we have 600 volunteers working around the country. We've put together a call center, effectively a volunteer call center, mostly of Jewish people who volunteered to call churches to tell them about the problem and invite them to our events. Mate, no, don't clap. Friggin' disaster. Do you know how apathetic, skeptical, or downright hostile so many churches are to Jewish people calling them to invite them to an event that is about love and unity? We're not asking anyone to take a position on peace in the Middle East. That's above our pay grade to solve. But what we're saying is, in Australia, we as the church have to stop the hate. And these poor Jewish people would email us back. Actually, we ran it all on WhatsApp. They'd WhatsApp us back and they'd talk to each other and go, why won't anyone talk to us? Why won't they come? That's been the hardest thing. I sometimes wonder what our Jewish Jesus would make of that. I wonder, And it's like... It's not hard to show love to a Jewish person at the moment, certainly in Australia. I don't know what your context is like here, but in Australia, as Freya has said, as we've experienced, they are hurting, they're rejected. For the first time, I have friends who are moving money out of Australia, buying property in Tel Aviv, and wondering what second passport they can get in case they have to leave Australia. In 2024! So to people who are suffering like that, you just need to get alongside of them, give them a hug, tell them they're not alone. I would say to people, when I would get a little bit frustrated, I would go on TV and social media and I'd go, listen, Jesus gave his life for you and he is Israel's Messiah. He's Jewish. Every spiritual blessing you have comes from the Jews. The least you can do is give them 3 hours of a Sunday afternoon to come up and say, you're not alone, we're with you. Yeah. The response from them was about as tepid as that applause. So, what we've said, what we want to do is create a movement of everyday Australians, everyday Christians, who will stand and say to the Jewish community, if they're going to come for you, they've got to come through the church first. My life, we're almost out of time, and this was our introduction, so now we get to point one. I have what the psychologists, I was exposed growing up to what psychologists might call numerous adverse childhood experiences. Growing up in Africa in the context of violence and war, my father was a mercenary, he smuggled diamonds and emeralds, all this kind of stuff. My mum was a refugee from the Holocaust, all kinds of intergenerational trauma, lots of baggage, lots of hurt, lots of fighting, lots of difficulties. My brother then later in life converted to Islam. My father was Catholic, my mother was Jewish, my brother was a Muslim, and I'm an Anglican priest. And
crazy. It's crazy.
It's like I'm a one-person joke, you know. You don't have to do the priest, the rabbi, and the pastor walk into a bar. You just go, Mark walks into a bar, and there's your punchline. In the book of Esther, there's a plot to ethnically cleanse the land of Jews. And Mordecai discovers this, tells Esther about it. And I'm sure many of you know the story. We've just, and Mordecai says this, Esther, as you might know, the queen is married to the king, but he hasn't called her into his presence for 90 days. And if anyone goes into his presence without being beckoned, then, it's like, so she's a little worried. Right? She's like, I'm not so sure. I might have lost the king's favor. And then Mordecai says this, do not think that because you're in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows, but you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai, go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. For me, God has said, Mark, out of your crazy background, I've prepared you for such a time as this. And you go, okay, great. Yeah. Thanks. But this is, I think, what the church is. This is not just me with my crazy background. I think God has put you in New York, Jew and Gentile alike, for such a time as this. Because if you don't stand for the Jews, who will? And if you don't stand now, when? And don't think that salvation for the Jews will not come. God will bring salvation for the Jews. That's his promise. God is with Israel. God is with the Jewish people. But if the Gentile church does not stand with the Jews, do not think for a moment that they will be spared. After the Saturday people, they come for the Sunday people.
And all that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. All that is necessary is for good people to do nothing.
Thank you very much.